My second project of 2022 and the final one since December ends today as I'm editing the video is one that I've wanted to do for a long period of time, like 3 years. Ever since discovering Flight Test on YouTube, I've always wanted to make my own radio-controlled plane. Last year, I bought their mini P-51 Mustang kit and spent a day assembling the plane. Unfortunately, its maiden flight would also be its last. I tossed the plane in my driveway, which in hindsight was very dumb, as it put other people's property at risk and was a really small space in general. Speaking of other people's property, the plane, after I had released it, headed straight towards my neighbor's car. I immediately cut power to the motor, and the plane proceeded to nosedive into the pavement. Although I never got to pilot an RC plane, I learned many build techniques from that project and now have the parts to create a new plane. This is that plane, my second attempt at a radio-controlled plane. A problem I had with the P-51 was that it had no landing gear, meaning I had to launch it by hand. I'm concerned that my throwing technique may set the plane headed into the ground and I won't have enough time to adjust its elevators to avoid a collision. This was part of the reason why the P-51 crashed. So I definitely want landing gears, or skids in this case, as I don't have any suitable wheels and I do have the ability to create some makeshift skids out of foam board. Another concept I wanted to include was the ability for the plane to be modifiable or easily upgradable. This would lead me to design a simple and generic rectangular body, but I wound up giving up on this idea as I wanted to at least have one plane created before I concerned myself with upgradability. I have all of my sketches in my personal project sketchbook, but I'm not going to show that here as I feel like it could be a video on its own, along with the fact that I'm short on time at the moment and have tests to study for. For the rectangular body, I used a method I had learned from Flight Test. It allowed me to create a smooth exterior for the plane that should help with aerodynamics, but to be honest, at this scale and for its purposes, aerodynamics isn't really a concern of mine. Here I'm planning how to cut the foam board to make a tail. My solution for the tail section is pretty weird, but it shouldn't affect the plane's ability to control its pitch and yaw. I also cut some holes out to put the wings through, but I accidentally cut a few inches too long, and this is where the plane starts to deviate from my original sketches, as will be shown to you in the future. I'm actually pretty proud of my project sketches, so I'll definitely show them in the future though. Here I'm cutting some horizontal stabilizers for the plane. However, these aren't actually the ones that I'm using in the plane as I had cut them wrong. Although they would work as a horizontal stabilizer, I needed the elevators to be connected as it would make it a lot easier to control both elevators using one servo. The final horizontal stabilizer that I used is essentially one long elevator that is moved by a single servo. I also forgot to record cutting the vertical stabilizer, however that design is literally a copy and paste of the horizontal stabilizer I had just cut. Now for the wings. The wings are an interesting story. I was debating how to make them while cutting the pieces. I had originally thought about creating the internal frame and then wrapping paper over the frame like I had done with a previous mini ground effect vehicle I made. But I felt like the forces that the plane may endure while flying or colliding into the ground would be too much for the fragile paper wing. I also thought about maybe doing the same frame idea, but instead of wrapping it with paper, I would wrap it with foam board. However, this would take too much time as well as increase the height of the wing to be substantially larger than I had originally planned for. I settled with a technique I learned from flight test when it comes to making the wing. I decided that would be the most efficient and effective way to create the wing, so I went with it. That means all this stuff you see I just cut here, that's in the trash now. It's too small for me to reuse, and it was unfortunately a waste of foam board. As for the rest of the build, including the new wing design, I didn't record any of it since it was already 1 in the morning, and this project was taking longer than expected to complete. And recording all of it would be too much of a hassle. With that in mind, here is the final build. Pretty far from my original drawings, but it should work. How well it flies, well, that's still to be seen.